Right, good evening from London, and hello from me, Dr. Dermot Hudson, Chairman of the British Group for the Study of the Juche idea, Chairman of the Korean Friendship Association of the UK, and welcome to our 33rd live stream. As usual, I'm going to have a talk for about 20 to 30 minutes. I hope I can limit it to about 30 minutes. And then I will take questions from the chat. And tonight I picked out two topics that I thought would be worth talking about. Hello to everybody who's joining. Glad that you're here. Anyway, the subjects I decided to have a chat about tonight, which I think will be of great interest to people, is the anniversary of the defeat of the modern factionalist group, the counter-revolutionary group that was defeated in December 2013. And I'm also going to speak on the subject of the DPRK and fascism. I'm going to explain why the DPRK is not fascist and why it is indeed politically and ideologically illiterate to kill the DPRK fascist or to try and associate the DPRK with fascism. Anyway, to address the first subject, on the 8th of December, we saw the 12th anniversary of the plenary meeting of the Political Bureau of the Workers' Party of Korea, which took the decision to expel the counter-revolutionary traitor Jang Sung-taek from the Workers' Party of Korea and to remove him from all positions in the DPRK and in the Workers' Party of Korea. Later, on the 13th of December 2013, he was found guilty of numerous counter-revolutionary crimes by a special military tribunal of the Ministry of State Security. The sentence that was passed was the death sentence, and it was immediately carried out. That was the end of him. And indeed, it was the end of counter-revolution in People's Korea. It was the defeat of counter-revolution in People's Korea. They had stopped capitalist restoration dead in its tracks. And at the time, there was an almighty hullabaloo in the bourgeois and imperialist mainstream media. It was as if the DPRK had not just carried out one nuclear test, but had carried out about 1,000 nuclear tests or 10,000 nuclear tests. And the imperialist media went on and on about it for the next following few months. And of course, the revisionists chipped in on this subject. And in several countries, revisionist parties actually supported Jang Sung-taek. And I was taken to task by some of the revisionists because of my defense of the actions of People's Korea. The crimes of Jang Sung-taek were enormous. He was trying to overthrow the socialist system of the DPRK and restore capitalism. he'd also been involved in gambling. He'd stolen €4 million from state coffers and used them in gambling, and even sold land to Chinese businessmen, which was not his to sell in the first place. The actions of the DPRK against the counter-revolutionary traitor were totally and completely justified, and I always have felt, and I've always argued, that if the Soviet communists had been the same as the DPRK, then the Soviet Union would not have collapsed. If they had put an end to Gorbachev, like the DPRK put an end to the traitor Jiang, then the Soviet Union would still exist. And respected Marshal Kim Jong-un, a few months later, addressing a conference of ideological workers of the Workers' Party of Korea, had this to say, and I quote, "The identity of the modern version of factionalist group is that it was an ideologically degenerate entity which was outwardly overcome with fear for the pressure by the imperialists and inwardly contaminated with bourgeois ideology and culture." End of quotation. And I think that sums it up very well. And afterwards, the DPRK mounted a revolutionary ideological offensive against factionalism and against bourgeois and revisionist ideas. The imperialists clearly supported Jiang, and just to quote the infamous Lord Alton of Liverpool, who is a veteran anti-DPRK basher, fanatical anti-communist and Cold War warrior. He praised the traitor as being a, quote, "a real hope for reform." He told BBC Radio 4's Today programme, and I quote, "I saw him at a distance at an official gathering after he'd been rehabilitated in 2006. And from the people I spoke to who knew him, he represented for many the real hope for reform in North Korea." End of quotation. Now, I should also explain that Lord Alton, I think he still is, but he was chairman of something called the All-Parliamentary Group on North Korea, which managed to worm their way into the DPRK and visit the DPRK several times until the DPRK actually got wise to what they were up to and severed any relations with this fake friendship body, because its real aims were not to promote friendship or cooperation with the DPRK, but to infiltrate the DPRK and to restore capitalism there. And of course, that is all detailed in my book, The Great Conspiracy Against People's Korea. Anyway, so back to the subject, the main subject. Yes, the imperialists, they strongly supported the internal traitor in the DPRK because they wanted to push the DPRK onto the road of reform and opening up and restoring capitalism. But the DPRK saw through it and acted resolutely and smashed this attempt And it is also, just picking up the theme from the live stream 2 weeks ago, it was also a form of class struggle in the DPRK, of smashing counter-revolutionaries. And of course, this can take place in socialist countries, and the DPRK fully recognises that. So the Korean people defeated the modern factionalists and continued along the road of independence, Juche, and socialism. And I think it is also very significant that once the factionalists were defeated, there was a big upsurge in economic construction, and the action the DPRK took has been proved right, because just look at the incredible amount of construction work going on in the DPRK, particularly what I actually witnessed with my own eyes in my last 2 visits in 2024 and in October this year. Since 2013, the face of the DPRK has changed. That is because they were able to smash the factionalists and secure profound and monolithic internal unity. So well done, People's Korea. Anyway, on to the next subject, which I've decided to include because this keeps coming up every now and again. It came up in a Q&A session organised by another KFA branch in Europe. And from time to time, this gets mentioned, that this idea that the DPRK is somehow a fascist state, or that Juche is a form of fascism. Now, this is, of course, total nonsense. It is complete political and ideological illiteracy. People who are saying these kind of things obviously cannot understand what fascism really means, and what it is about, or indeed what the DPRK really means and what Juche really means. It's also, I think, incredibly insulting to describe the DPRK as fascism, because Juche is the complete opposite of fascism. And moreover, the DPRK itself came out of the anti-fascist struggle. It was born in the struggle against world fascism. The anti-Japanese guerrillas led by President Kim Il-sung were part of the world anti-fascist forces, which fought for the defeat of fascism during the Second World War. They fought against Japanese imperialism, which was an Axis power. And what that means is that Japan was allied to Nazi Germany under Hitler and fascist Italy under Mussolini. They had signed the so-called Anti-Comintern Pact, which was basically an alliance of fascist powers against communism. Japanese imperialism was indeed the shock brigade of international fascism in the Far East, and of course it is forgotten that Japan itself was a fascist state, and it still does have features of fascism even today, because after the Second World War, the Japanese emperor was left in power, and there was no dismantling of Japanese imperialism after the Second World War. But to sort of get back onto track, this is a sort of very ludicrous slander against the DPRK, saying that it is some kind of fascist state. And I think there's sort of two sources for this. One, it's actually a deliberate slander and intentional propaganda by the imperialists, by the bourgeoisie against People's Korea, a socialist country. And these kind of thing, this kind of slander is peddled by, yes, the NK News gang, always in the forefront of lies and dirty tricks, and other sort of bourgeois propagandists. And of course, you had the book written, it's now some time ago, the so-called book, The Cleaner's Race, which was written by a academic in South Korea who was being paid by South Korea to produce anti-DPRK propaganda, and married to a South Korean, and he came out with this very stupid book called The Cleanest Race, which we've debunked. I've written 2 articles debunking it and a little book. But and also, I mean, really, the propaganda that DPRK is fascist is also a variance of the so-called horseshoe theory that the imperialists, I think, came out with maybe in the 50s or 60s. But I used to be said to me at school, the political spectrum's not like a line, it's like a horseshoe, and the far left and far right actually are actually the same. They join in the middle, and rubbish like this, which is complete nonsense. Well, it's more actually than nonsense. It's actually insidious slander to confuse people, to blacken and tarnish the name of socialism, the most progressive and advanced ideology of humanity, by trying to associate it with fascism and Nazism. And of course, it is ironic, as I will explain in a few minutes, for the imperialists to say this. And of course, there's other theories. There's the fishhook theory, and there's the snake theory, where in fact, it's not a horseshoe, but it's like a fishhook or a snake curving round, where you've got the so-called liberal centre is actually close to fascism. And I think this is borne out by real life, because in the 1930s, fascism and Nazism were enabled by liberals. It was liberals who were saying, oh, well, give Hitler a chance, or wouldn't it be good if Nazi Germany destroyed the Soviet Union? It was actually liberals saying that, and you can see it today with the amount of liberals who support neo-Nazi Ukraine. And of course, I mean, another source for this ridiculous idea is that here and there are very small groups of confused fascists who apparently support the DPRK, apparently, but this is very rare. And in my experience in Britain, the far right do not support the DPRK, quite the opposite. And we had experience of the real attitude of the far right, of fascists and Nazis, back in 2017 when we picketed the US embassy in London. And, you know, as per usual, we informed the police, which is normal procedure when you picket an embassy in Britain. We informed the police, and they turned up a day, and a copper cheerfully told us that there was going to be a counter protest by Trump supporters. And I thought, oh no. And I had a mental vision of about several hundred MAGA supporters, Trump supporters, suddenly descending on our picket. But in fact, what happened was one elderly American woman turned up and was making a lot of strange noises. And she was joined by a British fascist, yes, British fascist, who shouted abuse at the pickets, shouted abuse about the DPRK and its socialist system and the supreme leadership. Anyway, he was identified as an actual British fascist, a member of or an organizer, an activist in something called the British People's Party, which is now defunct, but does not, doesn't exist anymore. But they were sort of very hardcore Nazis and quote unquote white nationalists. So he had sort of turned up to shout abuse at the picket. So, you know, in our experience, fascists and far right do not support the DPRK because in Britain, fascism is highly anti-communist. Anyway, so to debunk this idea, I think it is very necessary to have an understanding of what fascism and Nazism really are. And of course, with Nazism is confusing as they like for some, for people at a very low level political understanding, because they actually use the term National Socialism, which is of course a complete misnomer. Nazism was nothing to do with socialism. So I think, first of all, it's useful to look at what Georgy Dimitrov, who was the head of the Comintern in the 1930s, who later went on to become the first leader of the People's Republic of Bulgaria. And he was actually falsely accused by the Nazis of starting the Reichstag fire. And he was put on trial. And Dimitrov was such a fearless fighter and so powerful that he managed to outwit the Nazi judges and actually got acquitted. Anyway, Dimitrov addressed the 7th Congress of the Comintern, the Communist International, in 1935, and they had a resolution on fascism. And Dimitrov gave a very lucid and succinct definition of fascism. He described it as the open terrorist dictatorship of the most reactionary, most chauvinistic, and most imperialist elements of finance capital, end of quotation. So there you have it. That's what fascism basically is. But of course, a lot of liberals have muddied the issue by claiming that fascism, which is something to do with national identity, and they try to say, well, of course, the DPRK puts in a lot of emphasis on national identity, and rightly so. But this is a totally wrong definition of fascism. It's not about national identity, and ironically, in the 20th century, after the Second World War, most fascist regimes were actually within the Third World and were actually puppets of imperialism, like South Korea, and a few other places. They were puppet regimes which were actually engaged in selling out their country. So, I mean, this idea that fascism is simply national identity is absolute nonsense. And also, Comrade Kim Jong-il wrote an excellent treatise called "The Abuses of Socialism Are Intolerable," which was published on the 1st of March 1993. And he also gave an explanation of fascism and totalitarianism. And to quote, he wrote, "Totalitarianism served as the political idea of fascist dictators. Notorious Hitler in Germany and Mussolini in Italy used totalitarianism as an ideological tool to justify their fascist dictatorship. The fascist dictators stamped out even the most elementary democratic freedom and rights of the masses of the working people and enforced unprecedentedly tyrannical policies behind the misleading name of National Socialism," in inverted commas, claiming that for the sake of the whole nation and the whole state, no working class movement and no class struggle could be permitted. The reactionary nature of totalitarianism is that the interests of the working people are sacrificed for the sake of the rapacious interests of the reactionary ruling class under the pretense that the individual should be subordinated to the whole. What is meant by the whole in totalitarianism is not the whole of the popular masses, a tiny handful of privileged circles, such as monopoly capitalists, major landowners, reactionary bureaucrats, and warlords. End of quotation from Comrade Kim Jong-il. And this is, I think, the most important point here, is that fascism is really, it's not about skinheads. It's not about Tommy Robinson. It's actually a creation of capitalism and imperialism. It is the child of monopoly capitalism. It is used by the capitalists as a counter-revolutionary weapon against the working class, and this is why the DPRK cannot be fascist, because it is a socialist country. There's no monopoly or finance capital there that can create fascism. It is as simple as that. And, and just to reinforce this point by examining the history of fascism, it came about after the First World War, firstly in Italy, and then in a number of other countries, and in Germany. And in Italy, it began as a movement of unemployed former army officers under the leadership of Mussolini. And at the time in Italy, there was many strikes going on, and in some places, peasants or farmers were actually seizing the land of landowners. The capitalists, the big capitalists, organized into something called the Confindustria, and the landowners simply hired Mussolini and his gangs to beat up striking workers and to attack farmers who were seizing land, to protect the interests of both capital and landowners. And that's how fascism came into being. It's that is the historical roots of fascism. It's got absolutely nothing to do with the DPRK or any other socialist country. And today, I think it's very unfortunate that many working class people are turning to the far right and are falling for far right propaganda. But this is because of disillusionments with social democracy, and also with communist parties and leftist parties, which have become alienated from the working class and are not attracting working class people. So that's the reason for it, but it's not the purpose of this live stream to sort of get into the issue of why working class people are supporting fascism, and why the left is so badly out of touch with the working class. All I will say is, I think if there was a strong, genuine left in Britain and in other imperialist countries, workers would actually turn to them and not to fascists. And of course, fascists offer a very false alternative. Actually, what they actually are proposing is not a redistribution of wealth from the bourgeoisie, from capital, but actually a redistribution of wealth or resources among different parts of the working class and along racial lines. And again, this has absolutely nothing to do with Juche or the DPRK. The Juche idea is a profoundly anti-fascist idea. And, one of my last points on this subject was, in fact, in people's career after liberation in 1947, fascist parties were actually banned. And of course, in Korea, fascism was simply associated with Japanese rule, and later with the South Korean puppet regime. So, I mean, that is why the DPRK cannot be fascist. And really, fascism is simply anti-communism. It is really it is aimed at smashing socialism and communism. It is a tool of big capital, and really liberals themselves are as bad as fascists. So I always say, scratch a liberal and you'll find a fascist underneath. And in fact, these days, you've even got liberal fascism, where liberals are completely intolerant of anything that doesn't fit their world view, and they're the ones who are quite happy to see people pushed out of jobs, denied promotions, denied jobs, banning of organisations, cancelling people. And really, I think liberal fascism and creeping fascism are a very big danger. And creeping fascism itself comes from within the state. And this leads me to sort of come to my final point. So I'm going to stop in 1 or 2 minutes. Some KFA UK member, in fact, KFA UK activist, raised this question of CCTV cameras in the DPRK, and of course there are hardly any. I haven't seen CCTV cameras in the DPRK on the streets. I think I saw one in the hotel. I wasn't going around looking for CCTV cameras, and I think I once saw one at the Muncie Day Assembly Hall. However, compared this to Britain, where cameras are everywhere, and I just read tonight that in Britain there are 21 million CCTV cameras, basically one camera for every 2.5 people in the country. That's an incredible number of cameras, and incredibly high level of surveillance. It reminds me a bit of that late 1970s TV series Black 7, with the amazing theme music, where you've got a totalitarian federation basically carrying out mass surveillance. Britain is a country that's got mass surveillance, not the DPRK. So this is where you've got real authoritarianism, where people's movements are being tracked all the time. It's not in the DPRK. So on that note, I will conclude, and I will wait. We'll wait for your questions. Okay, let's see what questions. It seems messages with certain sensitive keywords are disappearing on the fly. Not quite sure what you mean by that, but yeah, I mean, if you're talking about different messaging services like Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp, certainly there are some very strange things happening, and yeah, I've known messages disappear. Right. Well, while I just wait for people, I'm just putting a few links. I don't know if the chat is slow tonight. It doesn't seem to be a lot of questions coming through. Okay, right. Well, I'll start. Oh, yeah, here in the chat. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the problem is with the chat sometimes. It sometimes takes a long time for messages to come up, or you know, they don't appear, or you miss them. I'm not doing it. It's actually uh, you. It's actually YouTube or Google doing it. Oh my gosh, the word limit is killing me here. Hmm. Notice you do have a very nice collection of DPRK objects. Any favorite you can show us? Well, I think probably the best thing to do is to get something near the hands. What's that? Try and find something. Yeah. Oops. A DVD of the very great DPRK spy film, The Case is Closed. So I don't know, is I, if I start showing people books, it'd take quite a long time for me to decide which is the best book to show people. And it could be here several hours, but I'll tell you what, there you go. Don't know if people can see that. Yeah, and it's a picture of myself. I actually got this at the Korean Stamp Museum in February 2019, and they said you can have your picture taken, and it'll actually, we make a postcard with it, and then you can mail it to yourself. So that's what I had done. I don't know if that's enough objects. I mean, I might for the at the end when when it's just show you a few books, but I don't want to be sort of getting them out now. Yes, yeah, I agree with Ben. It's trying to read Dark 56. I mean, yeah, you are correct. After the factionalist group of Jang was uh, exposed and purged, there was a big acceleration of the DPRK's development. They successfully implemented the twin line of building the economy and nuclear force in parallel. People's career crossed the nuclear finishing line. It became a nuclear power, an ICPBM power, and the uh, construction of housing and new factories really gathered a pace. And in the last few years, the development has been incredible. Like you say, I saw it with my own eyes. Particularly this year, where there was stuff that had been built which wasn't there the year before, quite literally. Well, I don't know what you are writing, or why YouTube are deleting it. I mean, YouTube uh, are something else. And they make me nervous that, you know, one day the channel will simply disappear. I don't think there's actually a specific book written by President Kim Il's by President Kim Il Sung, Chairman Kim Jong Il, uh, that on specifically on fascism. It's covered in a number of different works, like The Abuses of Socialism Are Intolerable, which was published 1993, where Chairman Kim Jong Il I think discusses this idea about socialism and fascism being the same, and he really nails it, and explains why it is not the same. Well, I would have to look to see if there are any other books written specifically on fascism, but I don't think so, because the DPRK always had to struggle against the successive puppet fascist regimes in the South. Right. Okay. Yeah, I mean, postcard is a wonderful keepsake. I watched your recent BBC protest video. Has anyone from the BBC confronted you when protesting? Do you get many people are willing to approach and learn more? Well, last year, and I'll tell you what happened. We produced a letter of protest to the BBC, which we handed over to a BBC manager who came out, and he said he would deliver it. We got no response, so we also emailed it. And to this day, it's been over a year, we've had no response from the BBC, and we've been doing these pickets of the BBC since about 2017, getting on for about nearly 9 years. And once or twice BBC managers have come out and spoken with us. Quite often they just ignore it. And yeah, I mean, we've had lots of discussions with passers-by. I mean, the funny thing about this time was there was a massive amount of BBC security guards outside the BBC, which led to a few jokes being made, about, let's storm the BBC on the order of charge, because, it looks like they thought we were going to try and charge into the BBC. How can Palestine establish Juche? Well, it's a good point. I think that is best answered by Palestinians rather than myself, because I don't live in Palestine. What I will say is that both the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine and the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine were good friends of the DPRK, in fact, still are, as far as I know, and in the past had their own Juche idea study groups. There is actually a gift in the International Friendship Exhibition from the Juche idea study group of the Democratic Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. I think as a starting point, would Palestine would need to be free and independent before they could establish Juche, and they would need to defeat Israeli aggression, and then like you said, I can't really say because I'm not a Palestinian, but I would think that the principles of political independence, economic self-sufficiency and self-reliance in defence could be implemented in an independent Palestine. Yeah, so, yeah, I saw a month ago the visit of the Laos General Secretary to the DPRK, and he's meeting with Comrade Kim Jong-un. Does the DPRK maintain positive relations with other communist states? Well, yes, basically. And by the way, it's really socialist states because no country in the world has reached a higher stage of communism. It is socialist states. DPRK has good relations with Laos and Vietnam, and with Cuba and with the big neighbouring countries. So it's got positive relations with all of those. And recently, an excellent little booklet about the DPRK's external relations was published. Following Nobel scientists in the DPRK around the university where the reporter was just trying to stir up trouble. Well, I'm not sure which BBC documentary it was, but I can well believe that a BBC reporter in the DPRK would go around trying to create trouble. One guy walked in the same hat with Red Star in Ukraine. He got 3 years in, I think that's meant to be prison. I assume that's a joke about the hat being a threat to national security. Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yes, Rupert Wingfield Hayes. Yes, the BBC reporter with the double-barreled name who got expelled from the DPRK. Yes, I mean he admitted that his coverage was hostile and distorted. He actually signed a confession uh, to that effect. And the what I was told about him that even on the Air Koryo plane into the DPRK, even before he'd actually put one foot on DPRK soil. He was slandering the DPRK. And he was the idiot who said that sick children in a hospital weren't sick and that they were actors. I mean, he was extremely hostile. And say he got, he confessed to making things up, and he was expelled from the DPRK. And I don't think the BBC have ever been let back into the DPRK ever since. You know, the British Brainwashing Corporation. Okay, yeah. I think they will release some information, some data about the completion of the 5-year plan. I think at the turn of the year, maybe early in the new year, the new 5-year plan, the 2026 to 2030 5-year plan, will be discussed at the 9th Congress of the Workers' Party of Korea, which will be early in next year, either in January or February. I think actually in January. Yeah, I agree. I agree. The British Brainwashing Corporation shouldn't be allowed in the into the DPRK ever again. Too many lies, and as we stress, in reality, the BBC is a state broadcaster. It's a state broadcaster of the British state, of British imperialism and US imperialism. It actually works very closely with Western intelligence services, particularly MI6. Some of the BBC overseas reporters are actually MI6 agents working under journalistic cover, and other BBC reporters are very close to MI6 and spoon-fed information, so-called information by MI6. So they work very closely with MI6, and of course, the BBC is 1000% anti-communist. Communists and people with left-wing views are banned from working at the BBC. You know, with the BBC, you don't have to be right-wing to work at the BBC, but it certainly helps. You know, to use an old joke. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm with you now about the story about the hat with the red star. Yeah, so I can believe that with Ukraine. Okay, so while I see if there's any any more questions sort of come up in the chat. I think the chat tonight isn't working very well. I think this seen the same thing come up several uh, come up several times. While I wait for more questions, and I say probably finish in about 5 or 10 minutes, unless a load more questions come up. Yeah, I think YouTube has been quite wonky lately, but just back on the theme of fascism. I mean, fascism is really anti-communism. It's not people wrongly associate it with racism because fascists use racism. It doesn't always mean to say that there is always a racist element with fascism. And it was quite funny, a funny little story about the NK News gang. About 8 or 9 years ago, there was a Spanish fascist who briefly lived in Britain. He worked as a Sainsbury's security guard, and he was a real hardcore Nazi. And he set up an anti-DPRK website, which I don't think is around anymore. I think it was called Crea Libre, and he was using a lot of material off NK News, which of course is a subscription-only service. So, clearly there was some kind of agreement or collaboration between him and NK News. And I put something on the KFA Facebook page about this. And, it really triggered Chad O'Carroll, the head of NK News. He got really angry, and I suddenly saw this furious comment he put on the page, and he seemed to really trigger and hit him and offend him, the idea that he might be far right or fascist or something, and because he is, I believe, a right-on liberal. But in fact, people like Chad O'Carroll, they just represent a different form of fascism. They are simply anti-communist without the racism. But anyway, a couple of questions have come up, so I will answer them. I've seen photographs from the parade. Rain did a wonderful job. The whole main square was shining, reflecting everything as if the soldiers are marching on a mirror. Yeah, true. It seems DPRK can guard itself from perestroika. Good if they learn the Soviet lessons well. Yes, I think they have. And the Chinese lessons too. Well, I'm not sure what Chinese lessons you mean, but I think the lessons of China aren't very good ones, and also take the opportunity to caution people against a certain Chinese account on Twitter, which publishes a lot of stuff about the DPRK, but some of it is dodgy, and it's definitely got a particular bent to it, trying to make the DPRK look like it's a little China. I mean, clearly, whoever this person is really represents Chinese revisionism. Yeah, Abuses of Socialism, I'm sure, is online, and we might have published it ourselves a few years ago. It's I'll use the if it comes up, I'll use the archive.org, as you get the PDF that you can download. Okay, been going for about 1 hour. Just give people a chance if they want to put a few more questions in the chat. Okay. There were, this is interesting, that Gorbachev has, well, it's had because he's dead now at that time, he was flooded with occultist high-ranked party officials suddenly ran to churches. What is the situation in the DPRK with that? Well, in the DPRK, fortune telling for money is against the law, and the DPRK struggles against superstition and backward practices. As for the church, well, in the DPRK, Christianity, although legal, is a minority religion. So there are not many churches. Of course, there are Buddhist temples, but I don't think anyone in the leadership believes in religion. Right. Okay. Well, I think what I'll do before I conclude the stream, I should just quickly go and get one or two books just to show people as well, and then we start rounding off the stream. So just 1 minute. Right, there we are. That's bit. And I have this from my last trip, bound volume of the speech that respected Comrade Kim Jong-un gave to the national meeting on the 9th of October at the May Day Stadium on Runya Islands, which of course is one of the biggest stadiums in the world. And also, though the cover is faded, this is a copy of On Juche in Our Revolution, a book that I've read and reread quite a lot times it is a collection of works by the great leader, President Kim Il-sung, basically explaining the Juche idea. I mean, that is online on archive.org and perhaps one or two other places. I would recommend people actually read it from cover to cover. Anyway, just to take questions. I saw pictures of a flying club in the DPRK. There's now quite a few flying clubs. They've been building them regularly. There's one in Pyongyang, or near to Pyongyang, the Miram Flying Club. I have to say, I've never actually visited a flying club, so I can't really sort of say what it's like. Some other people, I think you'll find there is a particular KFA UK member who did actually visit the Miram Riding Club. He visited there, but I've not visited that. With regards to the flying club and other recreational facilities in the DPRK, anyone can visit them and enjoy themselves. I mean, the flying clubs are pretty, from what I've seen, are pretty good. Not only can you go up in microlight aircraft, but you can also fly model planes. Wow. Right. Are there books written by Comrade Kim Jong-un that you would recommend to read? Well, there's a number of books by Comrade Kim Jong-un. There's sort of collections of his works. I would recommend you read, in particular, the reports that he made to the 7th Congress of the Workers' Party of Korea and to the 8th Congress of the Workers' Party of Korea. I think those are very important works in having an understanding of the policies and lines of the Workers' Party of Korea. And also, I would recommend the following work: Let Us Hasten Final Victory Through a Revolutionary Ideological Offensive. That was made in February 2014 to a conference of ideological workers of the Workers' Party of Korea, and I actually quoted from it at the beginning of the live stream. Very important speech. It was written in the aftermath of the defeat of the factionalist clique. So, I mean, those are the works that I would recommend, and you can find many works on the books section of the Nainara website. Well, yes, yeah. I mean, they're holding the Pyongyang marathon next year, and yeah, apparently the tickets got sold out. Anyway, to conclude, I will be back in about 2 weeks with another live stream. Probably have it on the 27th of December on the Saturday. rather than the Friday. Just to remind people, we've got events coming up. We've got an online meeting tomorrow afternoon because it's going to be the 70th anniversary of the publication of the famous work on eliminating dogmatism and formalism and establishing Juche and ideological work. So we're going to have an online seminar on that work and the work of Comrade Kim Jong-il on respecting the forerunners of the revolution is a noble moral obligation of revolutionaries. So we got the seminar tomorrow on Telegram. So if you follow our Telegram channels, you can find it easily. And on Tuesday night, Tuesday 16th, we've got a online meeting to honour the memory of the great leader, Comrade Kim Jong-il, who passed away 14 years ago on the 17th of December 2011. You're very welcome. Everybody is very welcome. I will try to do my best to improve the live streams. I think I've improved the lighting a bit. Anyway, but it's great seeing everybody in here tonight, and I hope many more people will watch the live stream. I wish everybody a very good evening and see you again soon. Goodbye.